Hello, today I'm going to be making a pair of cupcake earrings and I thought it might be fun to show you all how I made them. These are 3 different cupcake earrings I've recently made, each with their own liners, cake flavors, icing, sprinkles, and various toppings. The ones I'm going to be making today look like this. Now before we get started, let me show you what supplies you'll need. The first thing you're going to need is polymer clay. You're going to need a color for your liner, a color for your cake, color for your cookie, and a color for your icing. And for your icing clay, I suggest a clay that is softer. You can get one of these cheaper ones like the Sculpey Bake Shop, and you can actually get this at Walmart for less than $1. Another clay item you'll need is some liquid clay. You're also going to need something to bake on. I use a ceramic tile which doubles as my work surface. Now, to keep your cupcake bases consistent, I suggest using a mold. You can make your own mold like I did out of scrap clay. I made the base, baked it, and then press it into another piece of scrap clay. You're also going to need cornstarch to keep your new clay from sticking to your mold. Tools you'll need for sculpting and texturing are some aluminum foil, a needle tool, a blade like this flat blade or X-Acto knife, a toothbrush, and an icing tip. I got these in a pack and I'm going to be using the number 13 star tip. Next you're going to need something to roll your clay out on. You can use a pasta machine like this, or if you don't have one, as I recently just got this one for Christmas, you can use a rolling pin like this one. To cut out your cookies, it's helpful to have this little cookie cutter. You can get this in the clay section at craft stores. For shading, you're going to need some chalk pastels you don't mind shaving, and some brushes. And for our sprinkles, we're going to use these little nail deco sets I got at the Dollar Tree. And they come in the fun shape glitter, this fine glitter, this sort of stick glitter, and these thicker pieces of glitter as well. For any areas I'd like to make shiny, I'm going to be using this Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. It's important not to shake the bottle like I keep wanting to because you'll get air bubbles. And for the metal pieces, we're going to need head pins, jump rings, and these little earring hook pieces. To put all our pieces together, we're going to need some wire clippers and pliers. Getting a little set like this is really helpful if you do this a lot. Now that we have our supplies, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is condition my clay by rolling it around and squishing it in my hands. Once you've got that, you're ready to put it in your mold. When you put it in your mold, you need to put a lot of cornstarch in there to make sure it doesn't stick. Now I'm going to cut a little piece off of that log I made and roll that piece into a ball. Then I'm going to press that ball down into the mold and press with my finger. If I put enough cornstarch in, it should easily pop out. Now you can see that this one has more ridges than I actually intended in the first place, but I like it, so I'm going to take my other piece and put it in there and push it around so it has the same amount of ridges. Now I'm going to cut off any excess clay that I have from my little liners. I'm going to be saving these little pieces to use later for my cookie icing. Now I'm taking the edge of my needle tool and pressing into those ridges just to give it more dimension and make it look a little more like a cupcake liner. While the clay is still soft, I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of shading on the bottom with red pastels. This helps add dimension and make it look like there's actually something inside of there instead of these just flat bases. I'm adding this to the bottom and the bottom part of the edges. I'm actually going to go back with a reddish brown pastel, give a little bit more dimension. Now we're going to roll out our cookie color. Once we've got that rolled out, we're going to place our cutters down there, press into the clay, move it along, press in again, and then we're just going to pull up any of the excess clay and put that aside. For these cookies, I don't want the little arrow pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and cut those off and give the shape back to it. Now I'm patting down the edges with my finger to kind of smooth it out. Now I'm going to add a little bit of texture with my aluminum foil. Then I'm going to flip my cookies over and add texture to the backs of them. There's a little bit of clay left over from my last project on the toothbrush, so that's why it's a bit red looking. I add shading using yellow pastels, then orange, and then the reddest brown, concentrating mostly on the edges, but going all over the back of the cookie. Then I flip them back over so I can add texture and shading to the front. I'm using the same colors to shade, but concentrating purely on the edges to keep the center lighter. Now we bake the cookies and bases for about 5 minutes at around 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Now to make the cake part of our cupcakes. We're going to take our cake color and roll that into a ball. Then we're going to cut that ball in half. Once you've got the halves, smooth them back out and make sure they fit your cupcake base. Once you're sure they're going to fit, it's time to put the head pin in. Take the head pin and put the pointier end up through the center of your cupcake. Now you can attach your cake on the base. To get it smooth and centered on here, I'm just going to take your finger and press on the very edge of it. Keep rotating and pressing until it is attached well. Now we can add some texture using the aluminum foil first. Then add a little bit more texture with my toothbrush. To give a little additional detail and texture, I add dots with the needle tool at the bottom of the cupcake. Now it's ready to add icing. Get your icing color and go ahead and condition that well. Now I'm going to tear a little piece off that I can put down in my icing tip. I'm going to be pressing this down using the end of a needle tool. The reason I'm using the end of the needle tool is that the base of this is wide enough that it's not going to get stuck in the bottom of the tip, and it doesn't have pigment to transfer onto my icing. Keep pressing until you have the desired length. Now that I have the length I want, I'm going to cut this strand in half. To start adding the icing to my cupcake, the first thing I'm going to do is add a dot of liquid clay. Now I'm going to take one end of my icing strand and put it right on that little dot of clay. Then using my needle tool, I'm going to smooth that out a little bit and then twirl until I have come to the end of my icing strand. If needed, the shape can be smoothed out with my fingers or needle tool until I'm happy with how it looks. Now we can add the shading to the icing. I went ahead and mixed up some red and white pastels for another project. Now I'm going to just dust that over the top of the icing to give it that sort of airbrushed food coloring look. Now, using that clay I saved in liners earlier, I'm going to add liquid clay and make the icing for our cookies. I'm going to press and kind of stir around until I have the consistency I want, adding more liquid clay if I need. Then I'm going to pull my cookie out and go ahead and ice it like I would a real cookie. Now I'm going to actually go ahead and add a little bit of that liquid clay for additional detail to my cupcake icing. And then I'm going to add sprinkles to the icing. I'm going to open up that glitter I had earlier and just kind of tap and let a little bit of it fall onto the still wet icing. After that, I'm going to bake the cookies for another 5 minutes. So now that they've hardened, I can find the area that has more icing to work with and press the cookie down into that spot. Now I'm going to add these heart-shaped sprinkles to the areas of my cupcake icing that have the liquid clay still. Then bake for another 20 minutes. Now that they've had time to cool down, I'm going to go ahead and add my Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. First, starting with the cookie icing area. And then I'm going to continue and add it onto the cake icing. After I've given that time to dry, I can clip the wires and bend them into the shape I need. I grip with one hand and one set of wires, and then with the round ones, I bend back. Put the earrings all together. You're going to take a jump ring, gripping with one hand and grab with the other, and you're going to take and pull in opposite directions. Once it's opened up, take this and loop one through the little loop you made on the head pin. And then take the hook earring piece, making sure that the pointy part is going back. And then press this back together. And now you have your finished cupcake earrings. Thank you so much for watching.